Hello, excellent people. I'm Charles Beatty, and this is Aim at Excellence. And this is my second video in my installment of videos talking about turning dreams into action. So, in the last one, I kind of gave a little bit of a background on some of the methods I've used in the past, and today I want to talk a little bit more about specific dreams. I'm going to share with you another one. I shared one last time. I'm going to share another one again. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean when I say dreams, because there's a distinction here between dreaming when we're asleep and dreaming when we are awake. And I'm not saying that they aren't connected, but in this context, I'm really a bit more focused on dreaming when awake. I'm thinking, when I say dream, I'm thinking about the things that you want for your future self. And I want to take a quick aside because I think there's an interesting kind of like pitfall here, right? There's a path you can take that is dangerous to your mental health. And that path is living too much for the future, where you're always worrying about that thing in the future and you're always waiting for the future to come. You're always waiting to live in that time and you're not happy now. I employ multiple college students. So in my business, my tree company, all of my ground crew are University of Tennessee forestry students, and they, in talking to them, I kind of get exposed to this idea that a lot of college students are really just there to get a job. They're just there to get out of college, and they have to spend 4 years in limbo trying to just get out of there. And the good news is the smart ones take advantage of all the myriad opportunities that are available during college that aren't available elsewise. But still, there's a challenge. There's a challenge for them of they know that they're really there because it's what they have to do for their career. And they're taking a lot of classes that are sometimes interesting and sometimes not. And sometimes they're just there because they have to be. And they're a perfect example if you know any college students or young people in particular, but that's a good example of people who live for the future at the expense of the now. And I want to draw attention to this because I think it's dangerous. I mean, it's not dangerous in the sense that you're going to die, but it's dangerous in the sense that you're going to be unhappy. And so the goal then becomes, how do you live in a way that your present is enjoyable and fulfilling, but you set yourself up for set your future. Sorry, let me see if I can say this better. Set yourself up for success in the future. And that becomes, because the other issue, right, is people who are so present-minded. You know, this reminds me of that kind of like the grasshopper and the ant parable, and the footnotes or the Cliff Notes version of it is that the ant is working all summer, stocking up stuff for the summer or for the winter, and the grasshopper's out there just hanging out, having a good time. And then come wintertime, the grasshopper dies because he has no food, and the ant lives, right? And so that's where if you're so hedonistic, and it's the lotus eater thing from, legend, you've got, if you're so hedonistic and so present centric, and you don't plan for the future at all, then when the future comes, it's going to kick you in the teeth. So that's kind of the two poles, right? We don't have to worry about the past right now because that's a total other challenge. But how we relate to the present and how we relate to the future, our dreams play a role in that. And that's why I want to bring this up, because our dreams inform where we want our life to go. And this is, once again, these are our waking dreams. This is our fantasies. This is our hopes and dreams for the future. I believe, based on my experience, that at least for me, my dreams form a foundation for many other layers of my life. And so what I have written down and what I have mentioned, I think I mentioned this in my previous video, but I'll say it again in case, is there's sort of there's this structure. You have dreams, and on top of that you have a vision, then you have a mission, then you have goals, and you have action. And each of these 5 things is informed by the previous thing. And so I'm not going to dig into vision, mission, goals, and action today. But that's the goal. That's the point of this series of videos, is we are going to dig more and more into that. Today we're going to stick with dreams. And so I've got my notebook here in front of me, and I want to just read a little bit from it, because the questions that I'm asking in my notebook I want to put out to you to be considering. And then I also want to share how I'm answering these questions so that you can kind of see what I think is relevant. And then please do, if you are watching this, if you share what it makes you think of, share your answers, because my big point, my big goal in this new phase of this project, like I've been doing this for myself for years. Well, now I want to share it, A, because I want to help, but B, because I want to learn and grow. So my hope is that if you watch it and you see things and it makes you think of things and you share without fear of me telling you that your ideas are dumb, then I can learn and grow from your answers to my questions. So my hope is that we can all learn and grow. So my first question that I wrote is, what are dreams and why do they matter in our daily lives? And so I gave a possible answer, right? And I really like this. I'm a big fan of functional answers rather than authoritative answers. So what I'm going to give you is an answer that I think is useful, but not the dictionary definition. And so what I answered is, dreams are the fecund, as of yet unordered source of our values, actions, and daily lives. So for those of you who don't know the word fecund, I think the word fecund is a super interesting and relevant word for this, because fecundity is potential for growth. Right? When we talk about fecundity in, say, an agricultural context, fecund soil is soil with lots of organic matter. Like, for example, this is where back in the day they used to drain swamps to turn them into agricultural land, because the swamp land had been sitting there for years in this anaerobic state, just building up organic matter, but nothing could grow because there was no oxygen, because the water at a certain point, keeps the oxygen out. So you drain all the water and you've got this super, super rich organic soil. So it's really, really, really fecund. And fecundity is a measure and can be a technical measure of growth potential. But fecundity also has, as a consequence of it, sort of a connotation that has to do with death and decay. So fecundity is the consequence of death and decay. So you have a life cycle that results in death and decay on some end, and then the fecundity is the result of the decay of organic matter. So I like that a lot when in the context of dreams. I think that fecundity in dreams are really, it's a very, imagistically, it makes a lot of sense, because dreams are, now if we kind of revert to the nighttime dream rather than the daytime dream, dreams are dark, they happen in darkness. Like, you sleep and you dream, and the nighttime dreams in some sense are even the foundation for the daytime dreams. They're even more disordered, they're even more emotionally laden, they're rooted in our psychology, and they're rooted in our past. They might even be rooted in our genetic past. I mean, there's some really interesting conversations to be had about, are you dreaming things that are connected to the emotional challenges that the people before you have had to deal with? Like, there's a lot of talk in the modern era of trying to find genetic markers that are related to discrete past events. Like, for example, let's say your parents went through one of the world wars. They were living in Europe, and they went through one of the world wars, and they were particularly traumatized by it, and their lives were forever reshaped by that, and their habits were reshaped, and their behaviors, and the people they were before the war are distinctly different from the people they are after the war, and they change because of it, and they raise their children very differently because of it. People even talk about physiological changes due to trauma and stress, and so these things become rooted in our genes, which becomes rooted in our minds, rooted in our psychology, rooted in our emotional bodies, and rooted thus in an expression through our dreams. So this is a little bit deep, and I'm not qualified to comment on this in any significant way, but once again, I'm trying to dig up a really rich option, sort of I'm trying to paint a really broad picture of how dreams imagistically are connected to fecundity, because they're that source for how we choose to live. So I think that's probably enough of that. Let me move on to my next question that I wrote down in my notebook, which is, do non-human animals dream? My answer was probably yes, right? Those of you who have pets, if you have dogs, we see our dogs kind of running in their sleep. So there's an interesting question here is, okay, I'm pretty confident that dogs dream when they're sleeping. What I then wonder is, do dogs dream when they're awake? Do they dream about the future? And maybe it's as simple as desire, right? Do they desire the things that they know that they already like? Things like good food or attention, right? So maybe if you extend this notion of dreaming, does a dog dream of you coming home while you're gone? So you're away at work and your dog is at home and your dog is lonely and thriving or craving your attention. Does your dog dream about you? Daydream about, oh, I can't wait for my human to be home? Like, do they have this level of mental and emotional capacity? And I don't know. And there may be some science attempting to answer this, but even then, the answers are always going to be inferences, because we cannot communicate directly with them in a linguistic capacity. We can't ask them the question explicitly and receive an explicit answer. So we have these inferential answers. So once again, this is all just sort of a curiosity about what is the significance of dreams. And I asked the question of, like, are dreams exclusive to humans? Because I believe that our dreams are connected to our actions. And I believe that our dreams inform how we formulate our decision making to get to our actions. And when you think about the way that dogs and other non-human animals behave, they live in that much more short-term view. They don't really seem to have as much future sight. I mean, there are exceptions. Or maybe not even exceptions. There's a continuum where some animals seem to be really, really short-term, and some seem to have more long-term vision. And then we have to ask ourselves how much of that is instinctive and how much of that is learned through the limited communal capacity that various animals have. I mean, you think about, I've always been amazed, Planet Earth, the documentary series, has shown these really, really cool behaviors of, say, porpoises in particular. And porpoises are reputed for being extremely intelligent animals. And you see these porpoise behaviors where they're out there like they're herding fish to the shallows, and then they're surfing the shallows to catch fish in that shallow water where the fish can't outmaneuver the porpoise. And you think to yourself, surely that's a learned behavior. There's no way you can have instinct programmed to that degree of sophistication, right? So some porpoise learned that through chance or through cognition, and then taught the other porpoises, and now that community of porpoises has that technique. But the other community that has no interaction with them doesn't have that technique. Another thing that they show, and I have actually witnessed this in person while sea kayaking, they show videos, some really cool footage of the porpoises schooling the fish to the surface, and then the cormorants diving from above. And you see this combo of porpoises driving fish to the surface, and the fish kind of ball up at the surface, and the porpoises are constantly moving in a pack to keep the fish in a fairly tight ball, and one porpoise at a time will charge through, and then above you'll have the cormorants flying and diving. Cormorants are diving birds, right? They dive down and through, and so you've got the fish trapped against the sky, and the birds and the porpoises are actually actively looking for this. And so sea kayaking, I have seen this from the surface. I paddled in fairly close. You can see the cormorants diving. You can see the fins of the porpoises hitting the water. It's really, really cool. And once again, it's got to be learned. Now, it's not that complicated, which is easy for me to say from a distance. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a super, I sit here and I think to myself, well, that's a really cool technique, but it doesn't take that much smarts. I mean, just drive the fish to the surface and keep them there and attack. I say that, but really the level of logical processing necessary to abstractly get there probably is legit. And so then there's the question of, can you get there through experiential learning and luck and just circumstance without the abstract processing? And I think the answer is yes. So you could go two ways with your argument as to what level of cognition these animals have to do it. But certainly there is enough communal behavior where they're teaching each other how to do it. And so then I ask myself, do these animals dream about these behaviors? Do they think about how to do this better? Or when they're out there doing it and they can't do this, do they wish that they were in a different circumstance? Like, let's say they've got some fish and they can't drive them to the surface because they don't have enough of their buddies with them or whatever, and they're like, man, I wish I had my buddies with me so I could get up there and do that. Because that's dreaming. Wishing and hoping and all that sort of stuff, that's dreaming. It's abstract thought. And that's, I guess, one of the things that I'm driving at here is this notion of abstraction. So we take this for granted as humans. Abstraction is just a part of our being. Or let's say I take this for granted because I live in a very abstract frame of mind all the time. You can ask my wife. It's very, very frustrating. We'll talk about something and then I'll just blow it up to this super, high level and want to just sort of talk about this abstract thing because it's interesting to me. And she's like, Charles, I just asked you to pass me a knife. We didn't have to talk about, why knives exist, right? So that's a little bit of, that's the downside of having abstraction as a tool in your toolbox, is you get a little bit attached to that tool. But I think we can assume, right, that animals, non-human animals, dream when they sleep. The question becomes, what level of abstraction of their sleeping dreams can they bring into their waking dreams? And the answer is, well, I guess my next question actually is right on this, which is, do they know that they dream? And I think that might be the step. So imagine this. You dream at night. You remember your dream discreetly. Not just you feel like there's two levels of this, right? There's feeling your dream. You wake up feeling the way that the dream made you feel. But B, the next level is you have the feeling and you have the memory of what you did, of what you dreamt. And then maybe level C is you attempt to extrapolate meaning from what it is that you did. Because dreams don't obey the laws of the real world. You can shift from place to place. Your mind fills in the blanks. There's not as much detail, but there's a lot of narrative detail. It's very emotional. It's very imagistic. And you can map meaning onto that if you so choose. So the question becomes, but you have to remember that you dreamed. You have to know that you are, in fact, a dreamer. Do animals know that? Or do they wake, look around, say, I'm hungry, I need to pee, I'm bored, I want to run, I'm stiff, I want to move around? Do they reflect upon their dreams? Do they know that they dreamed? Do they remember what they dreamed about? And if they do they then begin that abstraction process? So, this is all very speculative. This is just a curiosity, right? But this is where, when I talk about this mapping of our values, this mapping of what it means to be excellent, when I talk about going from dream all the way to action, or from dream all the way to action, what do I mean by dream? So, my last question that I wrote is, could the dreaming and the subsequent drive to bring dreams into being be a uniquely human thing? My answer, probably yes. Let me qualify that. Is it a uniquely human intelligent thing? Probably yes. I personally have put a lot of thought into, and I think I will discuss this at a future time, what really separates humans from non-humans. Because certainly one of the things that stands out to me, and I'll go slightly down this rabbit hole, avoidance of pain, for me, is one of the most foundational examples of intelligence. Because you know what pain is, and you know you don't like it, and you make conscious decisions to avoid it. Dogs avoid pain. Dogs know something's painful, they will avoid it. They will in fact develop personality traits and habits that are built around avoidance of pain. They'll develop dysfunction based around avoidance of pain if there's sufficient pain in their life. So, we're running up against the edge of my video size. I've talked a lot about dreams. We'll talk more about dreams again because we're laying the foundation. It's a broad foundation that's going to get us up to the next level. Next level is vision. Next time we talk, I'll share some of my dreams with you, and we'll talk about vision. Thank you for watching.